But also he described them as like half torpid and like with a singularly stupid appearance. It's like, what the hell is that guy talking about? But I love the Galapagos land iguana for kind of for that reason, but also because they're just fun to do research on, like the angled worm lizard, because there's like 4 research papers and they're very thorough. Oh, like this one details the complete history of their reproduction. This one details how they like experimented with keeping them in captivity and whatnot, right? I don't know. I wish that people were urged more to do that, especially because, we live in such a digital age. Everyone's carrying phones around, and I don't know, even like Western fence lizards and stuff. If people ever see like wildlife, taking a picture of it, posting it to somewhere, Twitter, Instagram, I don't care. That just helps, getting an idea of it. That just helps.
Welcome to episode number 108 of the Animals at Home podcast. My name is Dylan Perrin, and thank you so much for tuning in today. So today I'm speaking with Quinn Chavez, who is a reptile keeper, a YouTube creator, and an artist out of Southern California. So in this episode, we discuss Quinn's YouTube series, Herp Corner, and in that series, he breaks down just general information or any information that he can find about obscure reptile species that live on the planet. And he's found some very unusual species, lots of interesting worm lizards, the Mexican mole lizard, different geckos, the black-eyed gecko from New Zealand. There's I think he has about 30 episodes at this point. So we discuss his motivation for highlighting these obscure species and how he gathers that information. There's some great information in this episode about how to do your own research if you're looking to do that as well. Quinn shares some very interesting information and interesting facts about Charles Darwin that you may or may not have known. And this is a very fast-paced episode. Quinn has a ton of information in his head, and it was just great to chat with him. We also discuss the importance of citizen science. And this is something that we've discussed on the podcast before, but it's actually been a while. And I really appreciated this part of the conversation because, as you know, I'm all about how to progress the hobby forward, but also how can herpetoculture in general be a positive force for society in general. And citizen science is one of the ways we do that. So Quinn gives us some tips on how to do that and how to apply that yourself. And we wrap up the conversation discussing the ecological damage that outdoor cats can do on not only herpetofauna, but also other animals as well. I encourage you to head to the show notes if you're looking for more information on this episode, as well as links to all of Quinn's content. You can head to animalsathomenetwork.com for that. You'll also find a link there for our shop. $5 for every t-shirt or sweater does automatically get donated to the Amazon Rainforest Conservancy. And as I said a few weeks ago, we actually capped over $1,000 of donations, so super proud of that. If you're listening on Apple Podcasting app, giving us a 5-star rating and a review is a great way to help promote the podcast in that app. You can join us on Patreon at patreon.com/animalsathome if you'd like early access to the episodes, as well as the opportunity to submit questions to upcoming guests. We also do a Zoom hangout with myself and Liam from Reptiles and Research and a few of the listeners, usually about once a month. So if you'd like to join us for that, you can head to Patreon there. And thank you so much to CustomReptileHabitats.com for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. If you're looking for new reptile enclosures, really the best in the business, head to the show notes or the YouTube description. Click on the CustomReptileHabitats.com link. That is an affiliate link, so if you do make a purchase, a small commission comes back to me at no extra cost to you, and of course that helps support the show. Let's jump into this episode. Enjoy. Quinn, welcome to the podcast. Thank you very much for doing this.
Yes. No problem. Don't worry about it.
I'm happy to have you here. I think that you're up to a really interesting project, which we'll talk about in a second. But why don't we jump into just your origin stories? We can give everybody a little bit of a foundation on how you got into reptiles in the first place.
Yes, sure. Okay. I mean, I never really started because, the typical thing is like, oh yeah, I went over to like trails and stuff with my dad and caught like frogs or something. I mean, I did do that when we went to Hawaii, which was great. But the major calling to it, I think, was mostly when I was very young, like 6 or 7. I was always like, oh, I'm very fascinated with the concept of dragons. I would love to have a dragon someday, And then I learned, wait a second, people keep veiled chameleons. That's basically like a dragon. What the hell? Thankfully, I didn't go that route as a starter reptile. I think we all know how difficult the care for those are. But I eventually did go to a reptile show. And I got like a crested gecko, a tiny, tiny baby one, which was great. She was my first reptile. And unfortunately, she died when we brought her to somebody to like watch over her when we went on vacation.
Oh,
And for
damn.
some reason, by the time we came back, they said, "Oh, sorry, but she kind of died a little bit." Oops. Which is weird because how do you kill a crested gecko in the span of a week?
Yeah,
Like
that's very strange.
even if you don't feed them, they go on for like months and months without eating. Not that I've tested it, but that's like, you know.
Yeah.
And when we found her, she was like shriveled up. I don't want to describe it, but it was, yeah. I don't know. She was still a good pet though, good first pet. And since then I've gotten a few more guys. I just love reptiles. Uh, ever since then I've kind of hyper fixated on herpetology in general,
Mhm.
because like God, there's just so much to it, so much variety. I don't know. Don't worry about
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
it. 16. I'm turning
16.
17 in 6 days.
Okay, so
Yeah,
you're in grade 12 then. Or are you in grade 11?
probably. I, I don't know. I don't know the numbers anymore. Once you're in high school, it's like, oh, senior, oh, freshman. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
And then you mix
I'm
COVID into there.
like oh god. Jesus. Yeah, it's like third to last year. Second? Don't
Well, let's go with this. Let's go with
no,
this.
it's fine.
When you graduate, do you have a vision right now of going into university and studying herpetoculture or
No.
herpetology? No?
Well, I'm so I'm on the spectrum, as people say. And with that, academia in general is just kind of I can't stand it.
Gotcha.
Not that like oh I hate people who study at universities and whatnot. No. If you can succeed in an academic setting, like legitimately good for you. I wish that were me, but I'm really not good with the education system in general. So I'd prefer to stay away from college. I'm probably gonna pursue art instead, because just general like art industry stuff and like right now I have a sort of ad creative agency that I'm running. But either way, like college and universities and whatnot isn't a necessary part of that.
Mhm.
I used to want to pursue that, but yeah, then I realized no, it's not for me. It's not for me.
Well,
But
I think
yeah,
this is sort
I don't
of
know.
besides the point of the podcast, but I think it's also a really important point to make, and sometimes important for people to hear that everybody does not have to go to university. And sometimes I think especially in the
Right.
Western culture, it's like everybody needs to go there. You need to get a degree, and it's like, you know what? Most people, unless you have this narrow focus of thing that you want to go to, it makes sense. But there's many other things you can do that make more sense than going to university. So as far as
Yeah.
reptiles in your life in the future, is it mostly going to be, you think, in a pet capacity, basically?
Uh, well, I do want to pursue like more reptile stuff.
Hmm.
I'd love to do like a breeding project of some kind in the future. Especially, I mean, this kind of ties into the bulk of the conversation, but like I would love to do breeding projects for like critically endangered species that nobody really has any documentation about. For instance, I don't know if they count as critically endangered, more of lacking the proper assessment or whatever. But like Bipes biporus in what is it? I know Baja California is one of the places they're native to. Just a few different obscure places in Mexico. Nobody ever has bred them, as far as I know. Nobody's ever documented any keeping of them in captivity, which is very strange because if you look up Bipes biporus or Mexican mole lizard or whatever, then the first search that comes up is Bipes biporus pet, Bipes biporus for sale, care. Like, we don't know. Why are you asking us? But
Yeah.
God, I would love to start that because the demand is there, I guess. And it's not for money. It's not a money thing, but more of like there is just so much about like worm lizards, like amphisbaenids, whatever. I love those guys. They're like my favorite. But funnily enough, they're also the ones that we have the least info on. And I would love to breed them. I'd love to. We have no idea how that works. Some of them, they excrete pheromones. What the hell? The reptiles don't do that. Okay, well,
Mhm.
some might, but these ones do, and it's insane. It's crazy. I thought that only ants and like wasps did that. No,
Mhm.
they have like specific chemical combinations that you could probably use to tell the sexes apart, depending on which pheromone the other excretes has which chemical composition. It's like that could be crazy to do like a paper on. I know there's like one paper on them for is it angled worm lizard? They're in the Middle East somewhere. It's
Mm.
it's a worm lizard. That's all I remember. I covered them at one point. Don't worry about it. you know?
Yeah, I definitely want to, because I can starting to see how your mind works and how you can actually seemingly store a lot of information in your brain, which is amazing. So that's really cool. And like some of the best keepers, some of the most brilliant reptile or people who are knowledgeable reptiles are people who are just keepers, and they can devote all their time, all their I guess, casual time, or what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't matter, outside of their work, to study and learn about their animals, and they can, end up learning a lot.
Yes.
So maybe you could just quickly, I know there's a few enclosures behind you. What do you started with the crested gecko that went a little bit south, but what else do you have right now?
Well, I love crested geckos so much, so I got like three of them. Not all at once. It kind of built up over time, but yeah. So behind me, the two exoterras, those are crested geckos, and I do plan on upscaling soon. Although they are adults, I don't have my own living space. Obviously, I'm 16, but when I do, and when I have steady income, I'd love to upgrade all my guys here. Right here, which you can kind of see in view, it's a bigger enclosure. Is my Kenyan sand boa, Gongilophus colubridis. She's very good. And then in the way back over there with the yellow light is my guy Gerald. He's a blue tongue skink, Halmahera blue tongue skink, Toliqua, I guess. Yeah, and he's great. I love him. Those are all my guys. I have a pretty moderately small collection right now. I'd love to upscale, but in due time,
Yeah, no, that's good. Nothing wrong with four animals, and as you said, when you upgrade
Mhm.
their enclosures, you may realize that's enough space to begin with. So
Yeah.
let's jump into Herp Corner, because this is a project that you're working on. It's one of those little hidden gems that
Yes.
probably many people won't know about. So I'm hoping to kind of expose that and expose people to some new species and some really interesting information. I mean, in the first 10 minutes, I think people can realize how much information you have in your head, and more of that is on the YouTube channel. So let's start with
Right.
maybe first, what drew you to more obscure species? Because you have people who keep reptiles, and they like crested geckos, even though you already said you like them as well, but there are people who will focus on the common species, but for something drew you away from that as well, or had drew your interest towards the obscure things. So what was that?
Right. Um, well, I maybe there's just more general diversity between the different species that we don't really talk about. Plus, like, I mean, a majority of reptile species are obscure. There's just so many, I'd say a minority of species the mainstream knows about, as things usually go, leopard geckos and whatnot. And I wouldn't necessarily it drove me like away from mainstream species, because there are some keepers who are like, oh, I hate mainstream species, everyone keeps them, which I'm not a huge fan of, like the leopard geckos and the bearded dragons, but that's more of a textural thing. I really like small guys. I especially love like making videos on small guys, figuratively small, not literally, because researching it is a lot more fun, like for instance, I've been trying to branch out and also do videos on more popular guys like the axolotl. I did a video on them, and comparing the experience I had researching that one versus the experience I had researching, say, the angled worm lizard, is completely different. Like axolotl, about them. They sell like plushies and stuff of them all the time, and there's all sorts of different controversies relating to them specifically, versus angled worm lizards, where there's only like 4 images of them ever to ever be taken, which I mean 5 if you include the art I did of them, or 6. Oh, don't worry about it. But like it's so much easier to do research on like the angled worm lizard, because there's like 4 research papers and they're very thorough. Oh, like this one details the complete history of their reproduction. This one details how they like experimented with keeping them in captivity and whatnot, right? But with the axolotl, like search results, let me tell you, those are like you gotta wade through so much like mud and slop. I mean, no offense to the journalists who cover them. That seems very mean. I no offense to them. However, it really does muddy the waters on like new information. It's like finding needles in a haystack. Oh, here's a million articles about how they regenerate. Here's a million articles about how they're neotenic. Like we know that. It's okay. We know that. You don't need to tell us. But like, I can't look for any new stuff about them because there's just so much of the same stuff, and that just makes it easier to make videos on. It feels a lot less overwhelming to cover an animal with like 4 different papers, but also they're just cooler usually. I mean, like, yeah, there's a reason why a lot of people are drawn to animals like the I guess axolotl, for instance, because they're just cool looking, they're cute, and whatnot. But there's also just so much under the surface, and it feels a lot more creatively rejuvenating, I guess, to cover obscure ones, because like, oh, I'm doing something, oh, I'm sharing information, I'm making like one little HUD for all the information on one species, a complete guide, if you will. And that just feels a lot more fun to me. But also they're just generally cooler. I don't know. You
Interesting.
get it.
So why don't you, because I completely get what you're saying. Yeah, it's kind of nice to have the little compiled video, especially when on these more obscure species where you're drawing from different areas that, you're probably some of the first person to do that for most of these species, which is really cool.
Oh, yeah.
As far as coming up with like a short, concise video that just gives the basic outline. So why don't you just quickly outline what we're talking about? What is this series and sort of what is in each general video?
Right. So Herp Corner is kind of like a web series, I guess, where I guess basing it off of like the newest ways I've been doing it. I draw out like the native environment for whatever animal I'm covering. It's one reptile per episode. And I draw like the native environment of it, and I draw myself in it and like little talk sprites and whatnot. And
this
with
is done
that,
digitally,
I
by the way.
oh, yes, it's digital art. Yes.
Yeah.
And with that, I describe the general history behind the species. Yep. Did you hear that? Don't worry about that. It's a food truck. So with that, I describe the natural history of the species, sometimes the anatomy, and like basics of breeding them, and I think that's about it. They're like usually like around 10 minutes long, and I don't know, it's a pretty comfortable format. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, and when I watch your videos, the information that you provide makes me think, wow, this must have taken a long time to research. And then you watch the animations and the art that you've had to do, and that's like a whole other added piece. Like if I'm going to film something myself, most of the work is coming up with the script and then filming myself do it. But I can't imagine on top of having to animate everything.
Yeah. I mean, it does take a while, but like I've been drawing for a long time, so you get faster at it over time. If I like cram it really hard and like slam on the brakes and whatnot, no, that the opposite of slam on the brakes. Don't worry about it. If I go really fast on producing it, it usually takes like a week at most, and that's devoting a lot of hours straight to it. But yeah, I don't know. It works for me, I think.
Yeah. So I have a couple questions about it. Then the first is, how do you come up with the species you want to cover? Because you do cover a very sort of eclectic group so far. And where does the species idea come from?
Right. Well, it kind of depends. I mean, some of them, like for instance, the one that's going to be coming up on Halloween, it's not up yet. Is going to be the satanic leaf gecko, which I mean, that one I already knew beforehand. There are some that I just hear like a little bits and pieces of, because I listen to a lot of reptile people. But some other ones I'll go down these weird like Google rabbit holes, and like Wikipedia rabbit holes, where let me look at this family. Oh, let me click on one of these random scientific names and whatnot, and I'll do more digging on the species, and I'll say, there's like kind of nothing about this ever. There's no photos. What the hell? Like what is it? The golden-tailed gecko from Australia. Those guys are kind of more well-known-ish. But when you look at like the family that they're a part of, what is it, like Memphidae or something? They have all these different, other members of the family, and most of them don't even have like any photos of them ever. There's just the scientific name, no common name, no photo. That's it. That's just so intriguing to me, because it's like, okay, well, do we have like any descriptions? I don't know. It's like Bigfoot, it's not, but it is. In terms of like, you get it.
Yeah, it is kind of like, it's the sort of the ultimate mystery. We know they exist, but there's just so little information about them. It's pretty fascinating. Yeah. So what process do you go through to do the research? You've already mentioned, the Wikipedia and finding papers and whatnot. So do you kind of go through the same sort of procedure every time?
Yeah, like Wikipedia is just such a great resource. Like I know a lot of people dunk on Wikipedia all the time, which I get it. You know, if you're researching like, for instance, I don't know, like George Washington or some like super popular, super well known household name, then yeah, I'd recommend using other sources. But when it comes to like these super obscure species, I don't think anyone would go out of their way to like alter the information to say something like funny or something. Because who's gonna look up the golden-tailed gecko? You know, who's gonna look up the black-eyed gecko? Nobody, because the search like two people search them a month at most. You know, and so that's why I usually use Wikipedia as like a nice little area to gather resources in, and if not that, then the few pages of like Google search results are pretty good. You can probably find like Science Direct articles on them, as well as the Reptile database. That place rules. I love that place.
Oh yeah.
Not only do they have they got the common names, they got the scientific names, but they also got like the different scientific names or the different names that they're referred to by as in different languages. Like for the Chinese water dragon, they got like the Vietnamese name, they got the German name for some reason. They got all this stuff, and that's great. Sometimes I try to pronounce it, doesn't go too well, but they still got it. And under that, they got like all these different papers that have been written on them. It's great. It's great. I love Reptile database. I'm a big fan, like 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
And also they got like photos and stuff of them. Yeah, there's a lot of great places like that you can find.
Yeah, it is a fantastic database. Plus, I mean, you do quite often mention the names in the other languages, which is pretty impressive. But also, what's cool about Reptile database is that it will show you old names, like further like classifications from years past that we don't no longer use. They're there, so that can be helpful as well. So maybe you could list off a couple of the species. You've already mentioned a few, but what are some of your favorites that you've covered so far?
Oh boy. Well, my favorite is definitely forever going to be the Mata turtle. That was like one of the first episodes I did. I love the Mata turtle. Everyone does. There's that guy. Bushveld rain frog's pretty good, though everyone knows that guy. I really like the green gecko. What is it? The New Zealand green gecko. Those guys are fun. Yeah, a lot of different guys. I don't know. There's like 30 episodes at this point. Yeah, I know one that I'm currently working on is the Galapagos land iguana, which is like my all-time favorite species. Charles Darwin, he's so mean to them. I mean, it's so funny how mean he was to them. Charles Darwin ate one of every animal he discovered. No, that's not relevant. But he did. Yeah, he did at the Galapagos. He ate a lot of finches, I think. But he described their meat as the Galapagos land iguana meat as like. He didn't like it. It wasn't a full meal to him. But also he described them as like half torpid and like with a singularly stupid appearance. It's like, what the hell is that guy talking about? But I love the Galapagos land iguana for that reason, but also because they're just fun. That's one of my favorites, though. I haven't released that video yet, but they're great. They're great.
Are you gonna have those Darwin facts in that video?
Oh, definitely. Oh, absolutely. Oh, of course. Okay. Of course. Come on. That's hilarious. I love Charles Darwin. I hate that guy. He's interesting. He's a character. Don't worry about it.
Well, he's done some good work, but I didn't realize he was so against land iguanas. What's his problem?
Yeah. And the marine iguanas, which more people know. He said that they look like Frankenstein creatures. He said they're ugly. They're stupid. Oh my God. Jesus Christ. They're animals. But,
That's funny. It's funny because quite often people look at the Galapagos iguanas and think of Darwin, and I had no idea that he was so against them. But hey, I guess if you eat it, then maybe it doesn't taste good. You're gonna have an issue with that species.
Yeah, he's such a weirdo. Yeah,
but anyway, back to the series. It is really remarkable, and I think. Do you have a goal with it? Is there any overarching goal that you see with the series?
Yeah. Kind of. I mean, the main goal is like spread info on obscure species like that. And there have been episodes where specifically like the worm lizard episodes. I love worm lizards. Someone has commented on them in the past, like, oh yeah, I was looking for information on this species, and like you were the only video I found, which is like, I love that. That makes me feel great. That's kind of like, I guess, the main thing of it, other than just overall educating people on species like this, or like those or whatever. Spreading info, spreading awareness, stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and that's a cool thing about those types of videos is it'll continue to people as somebody searches one of those very specific niche species, it's your videos that are going to pop up because, like we said, no one else is
Yeah.
doing it. And you had mentioned early on in our conversation that right now you have a few kind of common animals, but eventually one day you'd like to branch out into keeping something more obscure. So obviously that sort of relates to the same interests that you're talking about with Herp Corner. But are there any you had mentioned? I forget what species that you had already mentioned. The whatever you had mentioned early on, as far as was it?
Yes.
I forget what it was. Anyway, are there any species that you think?
Axolotls.
No, it wasn't an axolotl. It was one of the California species that you were talking that is rare. It's okay. The listeners will know because they'll just listen to it. But anyway, as far as you're concerned, are there any species that you would want to work with one day as far as a goal?
Oh yeah. By bees by pores. That's what I said.
Yes, that's what it was. Yes.
But yeah. Other than that, honestly, like a majority of the animals I've covered in Herp Corner, I would love to do a breeding project of them someday. Of course, I can't breed all of them. Obviously, that would take an immense amount of space. But for instance, like the black-eyed gecko, I'd love to breed them, but you know how New Zealand is with their exporting laws, so that's not really an option unless I move there. That's but like as well, worm lizards in general. Angled worm lizards. I love those guys specifically. Like you can't even see their eyes. I would love to breed them someday. They're so cool. The Iberian worm lizard is pretty good. Who was it? Something beaked blind snake. That's a pretty good one. That's a snake, but I don't know, a lot of fun. I would just love to breed animals in general. Even like common ones. Even like my boy back here, the Halmahera blue tongue skink. There's not a whole lot of captive breds out there. And I would love to try my hand at blue tongue skink breeding, though. That's a little bit on the harder side. They're very aggressive when doing their thing. Kenyan Sambos are also pretty good, as far as I've heard. Beginner like breeding species. I'd love to practice before I actually, get my hands on like some Bipes biporus, because, well, there aren't any no one's even like catching them from the wild, which I'm happy about. No, I'm glad they're not doing that. But like that makes it really hard to sort of get hold of them, and that makes it so that if I did hypothetically breed them in the future, I would really want to make sure that I know what I'm doing at that point, by like breeding, like, I don't know, anything else beforehand. Oh, I'd also love to breed like the Sheltopusic at some point. The Sheltopusic, the legless lizard, the glass lizard, those guys. Yeah. I'd love to try breeding them. They look so funny and nobody breeds them ever. Well, people are attempting to. I know Snake Discovery is attempting to. I'd love to try that. Though that is, as it seems, on the harder side, since you can't really sex them. They're not sexually dimorphic, but I don't know,
Well,
stuff like that.
One thing that's standing out is, as far as the species that you find interesting, they're almost untraditional in a way, because typically people get drawn to the species in the hobby that are very colorful or are very interesting. Yeah. And you're listing like worm lizards, which are somewhat unremarkable when you look at them in a way. It's like almost like how, like if a kid were to draw a lizard, like it might be something like there's very like lack of shape, and like he said, you can barely see eyes and whatnot. So it is interesting that you're drawn to those. Yeah. Why do you think that you're drawn to those species?
I've kind of always been drawn to like stuff that people don't like. Like I was talking to my friend about this the other day. Her least favorite color ever is brown, and second least favorite color is green, and those are my two favorite colors. I love brown. I don't know. I love like the things where you look at them and it's like, what the hell is that? And I also like the ones where there's just so little going on. Like I love the super basic looking guys. Not basic as in common, more of like what is it like? So the snake that Colombian something, the one where it's got iridescent scales and they're like bright red and they got the black rings. You know that?
Yeah, like Colombian rainbow boa. Yeah,
Colombian rainbow boa. And I forgot the name of it, but they have like in their genus a cousin, I guess, which is completely brown, no colors. And they still got the iridescent scales, but they got like no markings. And I remember I saw this one guy who made a care guide on them, and he said, "Yeah, they're so ugly. Why would you even get these? They look awful. Just get the Colombian rainbow boa instead. Those are way prettier." And I remember thinking, but he's all brown. That's amazing. Come on,
yeah.
And like the rubber boas, I love those. Like my Kenyan Sampo, she's like a snow, which almost no coloration. I love that. I love that. And I don't think like my specific taste in reptiles is necessarily as it's not super far from the general, consensus on what, like, for instance, ball python morphs are pretty, right? Because there's a lot of draw in ball python morphs, hognose morphs, like western hognose, in having the least markings as possible, which, like you got the supercondas, the superconda morph in hognose, which effectively takes away all the brown splotches, and leaves you with just a light brown snake, which I find funny because they just look cuter with no markings. I don't know. And then you got the ball pythons where the all white one. What is that? The leucistic, the blue-eyed leucistic morph. I mean, that's pretty, but like, because he's got nothing on him. That's why I like him. I guess people might like him because like the bright blue eyes is pretty, which I see it. But the main draw is like there's no colors, and when it comes to like worm lizards, almost all of them, they got nothing on them. Sometimes you can't even see where the eyes are. You can't see where the mouth is. Like for the longest time when I was like actively researching the angled worm lizard, I didn't even know if they had a mouth. I had to look it up because you can't see it. They just have like a flat head. That's it. That's all they've got. And I love it. They look awesome. They look amazing. Same with the Bipus biporus. Got nothing on him, but he's pink. That's awesome. No, I love those guys. You get it.
I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but like you're saying, a lot of these animals are not in the trade. Some of them are native to the area where you live. What are the rules? Because I've heard of people doing this in the States, but I don't know what the legality rules are. What are the rules as far as catching wild animals and keeping them and then breeding them in captivity? Do you know? Are you allowed to do that, or I'm sure it's state dependent, but
yeah, in California, I guess I should mention this. The Bipus biporus Mexican mole lizard is not native to California. They're native to Baja California, which I was confused at that too. But that's like a state in Mexico called Baja California. I'm not sure why, but it's called that. But yeah, as far as I know, the state regulations on catching and keeping reptiles, I mean, some of them are protected, some aren't. Depends on how many there are in the wild and all that. But I've seen people here where they'll just like catch like a western fence lizard and just keep them like as a pet, and that's just what they do. Which I don't know if that's legal or not, but they never got in trouble for it. So I'm pretty sure it's decently legal. Though I know that like it's kind of funny. A majority of amphibian species, if not all, are just, you can't keep them. You legally cannot keep any amphibians in California, which was really strange because like whenever I look at people, because I love looking at those like Reptile Expo tours where people just walk around the Reptile Expo and film all of it. That's fun. Like looking at them in other states like Illinois and Texas and whatnot, they'll have like stands full of axolotls, like tiger salamanders and whatnot. And I remember seeing that like, wait, those guys are seriously that common? Are you kidding me? Because I never saw them ever, like in person. It's crazy. I don't know. I know, yeah, but the wildlife rules and regulations are pretty lenient in general here. I know you can like capture the red-eared sliders and whatnot because they're invasive, as is kind of everywhere else. But as far as the wild animals go, I don't think we have any that are particularly critically endangered or anything. At least I've never heard of that happening, but who knows?
So I know I've heard people in the States, go out and catch king snakes and breed them and then, create captive bred from a wild caught population. So maybe one day that might be what you have to do. I mean, you're not going to find worm lizards at the next expo.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Geez. Yeah.
So is there any other points that you wanted to add about just focusing on obscure species before we move on to the next thing? Is there any other areas that we didn't mention?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know if this transitions into the next topic, but a big thing that I really want to emphasize is like, because this is related, I swear. I also do like Twitch streaming on the side, and with that, I've been exposed to a lot of new people from all over the world, right? And at one point, I swear this is related. This is not random tangent. At one point during my stream, I for some reason the stream was flagged as me being in God, where's the place called? Niger, and me living Niger for some reason. I've never been to Niger, but it said that I was from Niger. And so with that, a bunch of people from Niger came in and were like hanging out with me on the stream, which was fun and all. But it was I don't know why that happened. And with that, it kind of made me realize, there are a lot of people in all these different places because it was a reptile related stream. And they all have interest in, herpetology and herpetoculture and whatever you want to call it. And with that, it kind of made me think, I wish there was more of like an urge, I guess, for lack of a better word, or a push to, if anyone ever sees, species like that are hardly documented, to just like take a picture of it, or like post about it somewhere, because you look at the species like the, ankled worm lizard. They got like 4 photos. That's it. And I think like one video that was taken in the Middle East somewhere on YouTube from like a Middle Eastern YouTube channel, which I appreciate. But like if there were just more documentation of like sightings of these reptiles, like that would help a ton, because it's insane how much help that stuff is, like. Here's a fun fact. The way for you to be able to tell between genuses of amphisbaenids, because a lot of them kind of look alike, is the amount of dorsal scales they have. If you count the individual ones, then you can tell. Like, for instance, the what is it? It was a European species. There's like 2 different European species that look almost the same, but if you count the dorsal scales, one has like 27 and the other has like 24, which is a super subtle detail, and they look the same otherwise. But like, and I wouldn't be able to have like figured that out unless I saw actual photos of them. Like that's how much photos help. And I don't know. I wish that people were urged more to do that, especially because we live in such a digital age. Everyone's carrying phones around, and I don't know. Even like Western fence lizards and stuff. If people ever see like wildlife, taking a picture of it, posting it to somewhere, Twitter, Instagram, I don't care. That just helps. Getting an idea of it, that just helps. I don't know.
No, that's a really good point. Yeah. Especially because we have a bunch of the audience is a bunch of reptile enthusiasts and lovers and interested in reptiles, and that is one. And I always tried to find ways that herpetoculture itself can progress, that can be positive for the community in general, not just the community of reptile keepers, but the community of people that we live with, and so being able to push knowledge forward is one way we can be a positive impact on our community. And it is as simple, as you said, as simple as documenting wildlife. We all have a high quality camera in our pocket, and then there are services like, I don't know if you used iNaturalist at all when you're doing your research and whatnot, but that's a really simple way to
wait, no, I didn't.
Yeah, so it's a really simple way to take a picture, and then it just pins where you saw it. You don't have to even know the species. You can just post it because somebody else will come and comment and give you the species name. And yeah, hopefully we can start collecting a little more than just the 4 images that are out there for some of these things.
Yeah. I mean, additionally, and this one is a little bit more of a hypothetical one. I know it's not quite possible for most people, but like for those of the audience or whoever who live in places other than like America or the US or whatever. I've never been to like Canada or the UK or whatever, but I know that those are similarly very city populated. Since I live in like a major metropolitan area, it's really hard to find good trails with like a lot of nice herpetofauna or whatever. And so if anyone lives in like different countries in Africa, like Niger, for instance, that have a lot of protected land, if you ever like go walking there, it's super helpful to like just conduct field studies, and simple ones too, like study what the different animals eat and whatnot, or study how different animals react to each other if things like that are spotted, like literally any documentation like that is like super helpful, because it doesn't need to be like a Science Direct article. It really doesn't. Like a post on Tumblr, a text post to someone saying, hey, I saw a Iberian worm lizard the other day, and he was like eating berries or something. Isn't that crazy? That helps a million times, because then I can say, oh, and by the way, sometimes in the wild they've been spotted eating berries. Like that's how much of an impact that makes on like doing research, and not only does that just help me, but if anyone ever keeps this species in the probably distant future, then they can do research on what they eat and then see, this person says they saw them eating berries in the wild. That's odd. I'll add that as like an extra place of enrichment, like stuff like that. It just helps. It just helps,
Yeah.
I don't know. I wish that like more of an emphasis was put on just normal people, non-academics. To say that not that academics are not normal. Don't worry about it. Going out, conducting like pretty kind of not necessarily tedious, just like basic sort of field studies. Like I wish that there was more stuff put into that, because you see these days a lot of like the biggest places that you usually see talking about like care and stuff about animals are like Reptiles Magazine, which nothing wrong with those guys. I love those guys. But you got Reptiles Magazine, you got like major journalists, mostly people with like fancy degrees and whatnot. When really anyone can do it, anyone can go on a trail and spot like, oh, a Western fence lizard is mating. I should take a video. Like you're not creepy. That is really good. That's really good because then you get to understand the process. And then if anyone decides to breed Western fence lizards, they might already. Then they can know like a better understanding of the process, because God, species mating is like a whole different topic, but it is all the different things are so like diverse within them, like God, you get it.
No, it is such a good point, and really it is one of the things that I try to promote all the time is that you don't have to have letters behind your name to advance things, and you can learn so much just from paying attention and either observing your own captive animals or going out into the wild or going out into nature and just seeing what's out there, especially if you live in a place that's a little more southern where reptiles are a lot more common to see. I mean, if I saw a reptile, it would be a pretty rare experience here. Not that it doesn't happen, but it does. It's very few and far between, but California, Florida, all these different places, Texas, lizards and snakes are around, and all simply taking a photo and pinning it on the map is actually helping. So I think that's a fantastic point. So why don't we wrap up the conversation here with cats? Because this is something that you've actually mentioned a couple of times through your videos, and I thought, I bet you have some interesting thoughts here. So as far as we're not talking, we are talking about pet cats, but it's not in a good light. We're talking about how actually destructive they can be to the environment. So what are your thoughts with this outdoor cat issue?
I mean, look, I have nothing against, cats and whatnot. Cats are great, probably. I've never kept any. I'm allergic to them, but they're cool. But like, here's a fun fact. I think it's like around 63 or maybe 70 species of native wildlife species have gone extinct because of just how common having outdoor cats can be, in North America alone. I'm not sure about any other places. And like, because you hear people all the time talking about, invasive species. Oh, I hate invasive species, which I mean, they're pretty bad for the environment. You look at the Florida Everglades, it's like a screwed up mess there, but like cats are they're kind of a part of that. If a lot of people will say like, oh, well, outdoor cats, that's good for the cat because, it's good enrichment and whatnot. Just provide enrichment in the house. Like get one of those like tree things for your cat, not a real tree, but, out of like carpet. I don't, what I'm talking about. Get like cat toys, stuff like that is like way better because otherwise they're going to go out, gonna swing at birds and like kill birds and whatnot, eat them. I don't know, mice, lizards, stuff like that. They're going to cause havoc on the wildlife. And plus it's super dangerous for the cat. They could get like hit by a car or something. And then people say, oh, well, cats are way smarter than dogs. They know their way back home. Well, they have around the same intelligence. Cats are just a lot more destructive for the environment in the sense that they can climb trees and swat at like birds' nests and stuff, whereas dogs are gonna like bark at a tree and that's it. Stuff like that. Like I know in the Union Islands specifically, I covered the Union Islands gecko in a video that's coming out. Don't worry about it. In the Union Islands specifically, the Union Island gecko is like critically endangered. There's like 63 of them in the wild, or maybe like 400, something like that. They're not doing well, mostly because they're in a small area. But what doesn't help is like the people that live in that area will like their cats, just hang out and just go around and just start killing the geckos, which is stop, don't do that, and it would just be so much better if like people, and not even just like this helps anywhere, honestly. Anywhere that has that has ecology, which is everywhere. Having your cats outdoors is just actively bad for it, and I wish that was talked about a lot more, because it's kind of controversial and whatnot. But what isn't controversial is the fact that they've caused like 60 to 70 extinctions of native species, because like cats are an invasive species. They're invasive, they're not native, they just cause havoc. They eat they eat things and whatnot. You get it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's interesting. They do, because of the nature of how they are, they get a bit of a free pass when it comes to being so destructive, and it's kind of an interesting predicament. And I do get, like, I know lots of people who own cats and love cats, which is great. And I also grew up on a farm, so sometimes we would have a cat outside that does like your mousing for you, like, mousing around the house.
Yeah.
And so I kind of have sympathy for that side, but at the same time, it's impossible to look beyond the stats that show how destructive they are. And there are actually ways to put your cat outside that don't involve letting it have full access to the environment. I actually had someone on the podcast years ago, probably like one early on, and they built these large outdoor like run cages. So it would be, these massive cages that you could put outside. You could allow your cat to go outside, but it wouldn't have free access to the environment, which is another way to, let them go outside. So it is tough. And I know in the Netherlands, one of my patrons had just sent this article to me or brought it to my attention last week. They're actually putting a bill or proposing a bill to ban outdoor cats. I'm not sure if you've seen that.
Oh,
and so that will be interesting to see how that plays out.
That's interesting. I love the Netherlands. Yeah. That's what I mean. That would be definitely helpful. I'm not super familiar with the herpetofauna in the Netherlands, but it would probably help a ton, as well as the other fauna and whatnot. Yeah.
But it is interesting
cats,
how they get, like you said, like a free pass, and we kind of have to, especially on the animal rights side, people will really attack the reptile hobby, and we ignore the fact that really when you talk about damage-wise to the environment, cats, and then damage-wise to people, you're probably looking at dogs causing the most damage as far as hospital bills, and I love dogs too, so I'm not trying to throw dogs and cats under the bus here, but we always get attacked when really it's those two species or group of animals that cause probably more problems.
Yeah. I mean, as far as animal rights goes, I'm not super, familiar with the movement. All I know is PETA and the screwed up stuff that they like to do. I mean, like they've done like good journalism on stuff before. Like I'm sure you've probably seen or at least heard about the video that they did where they were touring the what is it? So there's PetSmart, and PetSmart gets their reptiles from Reptiles by Mac, which is a big breeder. And then Petco decided, not Petco, PETA, different people, decided to tour the different places, and they were like, oh, it was pretty screwed up, It's
a rough video to watch.
It's a rough video to watch. It really is. But like you got pretty good journalism on PETA's end like that, but then you've also got like the screwed up sort of, for lack of a better word, takedowns of the hobby, where it's like, oh yeah, they don't know anything about reptile keeping. They just put a big animal in a tiny box. What the hell's up with that? No, there's more to it. But like, I mean, PETA also does its fair share of screwed up stuff as it relates to like cats and dogs. Like, I don't know if you've heard about this, but PETA is just in general against, I don't know if they changed it, but they're just in general against people keeping animals in captivity at all. Any rescues that they get, like dogs, pit bulls, especially cats, they'll just put them down. They'll just euthanize them, that's awful. Well, why would you do that? But yeah, I don't know anything about the animal rights thing outside of PETA. Though, it's got its fair share of weirdos, but it's also probably got decently minded, really concerned about like facts and stuff. People, I don't know, but PETA's the main people that I'm familiar with. That's kind of weird.
Well, I thought it's interesting that as you're doing this research for these obscure species, that the cat issue came up more than once. Like you think, okay, well,
Oh
maybe one
God.
species has an issue with cats, but no, it was like at least twice I heard in your videos, and haven't watched all of them
Yeah.
yet. So it is, it's a problem, and it's hard. It's a hard one to solve.
Yeah. Good. I mean, yeah, I guess the as far as solving it goes, I mean, I'd honestly just recommend normalizing having indoor enrichment for your cats. Like I remember I saw, I don't know what it was, probably like an Instagram reel or a TikTok or something. I'm not on TikTok, but I saw it, where it was like a guy who installed this huge fixture all around his room, that was like stuff to climb and like wooden little carvings for the cat to like go in and just sit in and like climb around, and like that's great, that's awesome. I just wish that like a lot of people considered that a lot more, because there's just in general, in terms of keeping animals, the enrichment part isn't really taken account for just like a majority of the time, which, I don't necessarily blame people for that, because the only reason why I or you or, anyone has probably anyone within the reptile hobby has probably considered enrichment is because of, going deeper into it, like,
Mhm.
oh, wait, I should probably start, like including like tubes and stuff for them to walk around in, like you only really hear about that after you really start getting invested in the animal, and a lot of people that like keep cats and dogs, no offense to them, often only really have a surface level explanation. People still feed their cats like kibble and stuff, which I've heard. I don't know if this is true. I'm not a cat person, but I've heard it's not the best idea. Stuff like that. It's just like I think it mostly stems from having a very basic sort of surface level understanding of how the animal works, and after doing more research and stuff on it, only then do you realize, I guess there's a lot more to their like neurology or whatever that goes into it. I should probably cater to that. This is a whole organism that I gotta care for.
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think like stuff like that should be normalized a little bit more.
Yeah,
You know.
it is interesting. When you buy a reptile, or especially people listening to the show, there is the whole experience of doing research and understanding that species before you get it. Where cats and dogs is a lot more, like you said, basic. It's just sort of people get an animal and they don't think of it as an animal that has husbandry. A lot of the time, there are probably some people out there that do, but most of the time, like you said, they go by their whatever kibble, and then that's the whole thing. So, yeah, it is interesting the way those two worlds kind of play together. Is there anything else that we didn't cover today that you wanted to mention? I think we covered most things, but
Yeah. I think that's all. Yeah.
cool. Well, Quinn, I
Nothing
really
else.
appreciate you coming on, and I want people to go check out your work. So can you let everybody know where they can find you online?
Sure, yeah. Well, I hope you included a link in the description to the channel specifically. That's the biggest thing I want to promote. Drinks with 3 S's. Twitter drinks art. I don't really post there too much. Instagram drinks with 5 S's. And that's kind of that's for the most part. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, that's all. That's
Drinks
all.
with different amounts of S's. I'll make sure everything's in the show notes so people can go find it. And
3 or more. Yeah.
3 or more. And people will go check out your series, and we'll definitely stay up to date with it because I'll be curious to see how other species that you cover and how it kind of evolves over time. So thank you so much for spending the time with me today, and thank you for starting to highlight other species and issues that we don't necessarily talk about in the hobby very much. So I really appreciate that.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
All right, that is the end of that episode. Quinn, thank you so much for jumping on an episode and sharing all of that information with us. I can tell that you do have a ton of information in your head, so I was happy we were able to tap into that today. Listeners, I do really hope you enjoyed that episode. Make sure you go check out Quinn's content. Again, it's so great to find small creators that are doing these really unique projects. So if you are interested in some of these obscure species, go check out Herp Corner. Again, everything is in the show notes. You can find that at animalsathomenetwork.com. If you'd like to join us on Patreon, head to patreon.com/animalsathome. And again, thank you so much to customreptilehabitats.com for sponsoring this episode. I will catch you guys next Sunday.